Hi, my name is Rebecca Rowland, and this is my video analysis and reflection audio slash video. I don't know if this will come out as a video or an audio because I'm not sure how this works, but hopefully either is fine. So I ended up choosing the chapter called Key Ideas in Global Framework. And overall I struggle really knowing how to identify a lot of these words, and so I looked up what globalization is, which is a word used to describe the growing interdependence of world's economics, cultures, and populations brought about cross-border trade in goods and services, technology, and flows of investment, people, and information. So the summary basically of this chapter is talking about globalization and how it has different impacts of all facets of social, political, and cultural life throughout the world. So in this chapter, they specifically point out different countries and like how globalization looks to them. And so that's what it talks about. It also talks about how globalization is, different parts of the world with different religion, beliefs, and values. And today, globalization is reshaping our lives. And so the thing is we can't predict the future and or really know like with globalization like what that is going to look like, and so that's the challenging part. But overall, we can think about, can we expect a growing homogenization of culture globally, and with like the reading with McDonaldization, they kind of bring up of the McWorld of, diversity and just the changes with technology and cultural and people and religion and all of that. So, even going into, war, violence versus peace and different things like that. And so I think this aligns with social work because we are going to work with individuals with different viewpoints of the world. And our world is going to continue to grow and change. And as social workers, we're going to have to adapt and really learn, what is changing with globalization and kind of stay up to date with that. And our social work competencies talk about engaging, assessing, evaluating our clients. And we can all do that with globalization because we can learn about it through our clients, as well as, watching the news and, staying up to date with, the things that are going on in our cultural awareness and in our world in general. So yeah, we're going to continue to have changes in our world, in our cultures and communities, and we're going to have to learn new things when we meet with our clients. And so, the hard thing is the future remains uncertain, but we're going to have to, do our best to understand and adapt to the changes of globalization. So, I guess going a little deeper into the chapter. So, there's one point in the reading where it's talking about how we need to think globally, and that kind of mentioned that already. So we need to appreciate interconnectedness and focus on different country levels of, the world. Globalization theorists, task global fields of action, network of interaction, and organized institutional practices and they question like what is society, and I think all of us have to like ask that on a daily basis of like what, like, are we, what is this world, what, how does, you know, certain situations define a person, you know. So we are, you know, oh, I already said that, sorry. So yeah, there was, you know, we have to think about like to today and like tomorrow and like what's yet to come with, you know, the challenges with it. And so we just need, it's very hard like right now, because we're human and we don't really see like, I feel like we're kind of blind in some sense. You know, we live in a scary world out there, and like we are very dimly seeing, you know, how globalization is, you know, collectively impacting humans. And so, you know, ahead of us, we have to have like a cultural boundary, and we have to value like different cultures in our towns. You know, I live in a small rural community, but, you know, there are a lot of people that come from different cultures and different countries, immigrants and their families, and I have to kind of be aware of their culture and what they're going through politically with their religion and practices. But there was in this chapter, they talk about little different things that we need to be aware of. And I'm not sure if I know how to say all of these, but ethnoscapes, so the impact of migration of people, whether it's immigrants or refugees, so we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of mediascapes, so the dissemination of information by new communication of technologies. We have to be aware of technoscapes, the flow of technologies across existing political boundaries. We have to be aware of financial scapes, the flow of global capital, and also another, and the last thing was ideoscapes, so the images of constituent elements of a worldview. So that's like entailing like globalization, and that's what I think the main theme of this chapter was, is starting to become aware of these different things. And so that's like one of the themes, and then they also talk about like, you know, economic, political, and cultural futures. So their example was like someone not graduating and not having, cannot expect to enter the ranks of professional middle class, or, you know, different living in developing nations, the futures of poor people living in different countries, you know, overall like political realm and democracy, religion and cultural, and different things like that, I think, are a huge thing in this chapter. Even talking about like human rights, different network and civil society of information, global networks, and culture. I think were huge themes in this chapter. The next section was kind of relating the competencies of social work practice, and kind of, you know, relating it to this chapter of globalization. And I pick three, and a lot of the three competencies I pick do blend together. But the first one was advance human rights and social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. And in that competency, it's really geared toward advocating for human rights for individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. And so, you know, that goes into the macro, meso, and micro levels. And as social workers, you know, we have to have the knowledge about the global intersecting of the ongoing injustices, you know, with the clients that we meet, because we never know, you know, who we're going to meet, what their story is, what they're going to tell us. and we have to be aware of what they're, what they are going to say without any judgment, and kind of be aware of, like, history and like the results in oppression and racism, and just kind of knowing our role. And even in our code of ethics, we have to, show dignity and respect for all individuals we work with. So I think that's one thing, or one competency. Another is was engaging anti-racism, diversity, equality, and inclusion. So again, it relates to the last one, but we need to, you know, understand how racism and oppression and everything that I mentioned before, how it shapes a human's experience. And I think with globalization, that's a lot. They include all these different, aspects in globalization, like globally, worldwide, all these different artifacts. And we have to know how all of these things intertwine and how they affect the nation, communities, groups, people in general. And so, we also need to understand, white supremacy and privilege and their knowledge, awareness, and skills, and understand diversity and intersectionality. And so I found on this website different parts of intersectionality that relate to a lot and like intertwine so closely with globalization, because it all affects a person. So age, class, color, culture, diversity, ability, ethnicity, gender identity, expression, generational status, immigration status, legal status, marital status, political ideology, race, nationality, religion, sexuality, sex, sexual orientation, sovereign status. And so even knowing that, but even knowing like those who are in poverty, who are a part of marginalized populations, who have privilege and power, and those who don't have a voice. And so I think that is one competency also that I think relates to this chapter. And the last one I chose was engaging with individual, family groups, and communities. Excuse me. And overall, with globalization, so we have, as social workers in our practice and as human beings, I think we have to be self-reflective. We have to emphasize and use our interpersonal skills, our own power and privilege, and kind of like recognize our own qualities and our own privileges and beliefs and all these different things, and how do we take that and how do we engage with diverse clients and constituencies. Because I think when I hear globalization, I think of different countries, and that's what is globalization. But and I've gone on mission trips before, and I see it, and then I come here, and then I'm like, it's hard to go back and to think, wow, all these people, have all these different challenges, and here I am having more privileges, and so it's kind of, that's why I think it's awesome with like social work practice, because we get to learn from other people and what they're going through with globalization. And as I stated before, with globalization, like economics, culture, populations, goods, services, technology, investment, people, and overall just information. And so, I think that's an awesome opportunity to really get to know a person, as well as not just meeting with them, but staying up to date on the news and everything. I think it helps when we hear about it, though, from the person sitting in front of us, because we get to hear their voice, see them, versus like just watching on the news. It's not as meaningful as it may be, if that makes sense. Um, and so, yeah, and then overall, for my conclusion, um, I I liked learning more about globalization, because this is what. Sorry, I'm like looking off my notes as I'm talking about all of this, but as a future social worker, I know I will have students, like I just mentioned, coming from different parts of the world, and I need to realize the effects of globalization, not just with them, but with their families, with how they were raised, their living situation, and different things like that, and how it affects them with their schoolwork and their relationships, their social emotional well-being, all of that. Um, and so I think, with this chapter, it talks about cultural boundaries, global cultural, human rights, dignity, worth of a person, understanding culture, and everything that is globalized, of what someone may think is affecting them through globalization. Um, and so yeah, I guess I would want everyone to understand that as a society, as a world, as a community, civilization, whatever, um, is that we need globalization, and to understand it, to focus on these intense conflicts that people have because of globalization. And overall, I just want people to be challenged and aware of what is around them, and just to be considerate, because I think it's hard that, like I mentioned before, like we may not live it, or we might not experience different things happening in our globalized society, but someone else might be, and that's when we have to, or should be challenged, with advocating and helping them and trying to understand who they are as a person and not just by their situation. So anyways, thank you for listening.